Hi, and welcome to Fitness Presence. Today we're going to be working on the biomechanics of the body, just to give you an overview, if you're not super familiar with how the major muscle groups in the body work and work together and coordinate, and also how they antagonize one another, so that we can think about how do we create antagonist resistance, which is going to be one of the ways that we create resistance through our strength training. We want to think about ranges of movement and also planes of movement and what the different joints do. It's not going to go super deep. It's not necessary for you to get fantastic results for you to go super deep, so I don't want to complicate it. So let's just start off at the top and work our way down and think about the muscle groups that are in the movements that we're going to have. And so the first one we're going to look at is our neck, right? So the function of the neck. And the neck actually works on all three planes of movement. So the three planes of movement, again, are sagittal when we're coming forward or back. Muscles always pull, so the muscles are going to pull, the front muscles are going to pull your neck down, and then the muscles in the back of your neck are going to stretch you back that way. On a frontal plane is side to side, so that's going to be when you take your head and go toward from one ear to the other. And again, the muscles are going to be pulling you down, and the muscles that are going to create resistance will be on the opposite side. So as I pull from one side, if I want to add a little bit of resistance, I just add a little resistance of antagonism on the other side. And you move through, and again, making sure our neck is elongated. We don't want to collapse anything in the spine. We're going high and we're going on this plane, keeping our neck elongated as much as we can through that range. And then for transverse, it's just rotational. So we're taking our head and rotating. And again, to create resistance, you just pull with the side that you're rotating toward and resist with the side that you're pulling away from. And you create a little bit of extra resistance inside there as you go side to side. Pretty simple, right? So we're working our way down our neck, and then we're going to go into traps. And traps is one of the areas that it impacts shoulders, because traps pull them up. That's what the traps kind of do. Pull them up and might pull them back. And so anytime you're doing a movement where you're pulling your arms up, or if you're coming up over your head and pulling your arms up, that's going to be traps. The part that's pulling the shoulders up this way. The rotation of the shoulders is going to be deltoids, but pulling them up is going to be a trap exercise, trapezius. Then we'll move our way down and get into the deltoids. Now, the deltoids have a lot of different movement, right? It's, you think about a swimming stroke, right? You have the butterfly, you have backstroke, you have breaststroke, right? And all of that is an indication that this is a joint that moves in every direction. There are three heads to the deltoid: the front, anterior, medial, middle, posterior, back. And so muscles always pull. If you're moving your arm forward, the anterior head of the shoulder is going to be pulling through here. If you want to create an antagonist resistance, in other words, you want to make it a little more difficult to pull that arm across, you're actually going to be resisting with the opposite muscle, right? So you're going to have the anterior pulling across and the posterior muscle contracting to give resistance. And so if we think about that movement here, anterior, posterior, and that's the medial head, right? So the medial head of the shoulder is going to pull it up. The traps are going to pull the shoulders up and in, but the rotation of the arm around that is going to be performed by the medial head, primarily medial head. So where do you create resistance if you're trying to make it more difficult to lift? Again, muscles pull, so you're going to look underneath the arm, and you have your muscles right up and through here called serratus. If you go further back, you have your lats. And so when you're pulling up, if you want to create resistance, you're actually contracting with those muscles. We talked a little bit about pulling the arms forward. If you pull your shoulders forward and also allow them to curl around your body, then you start getting into the chest. The function of the chest is to bring your arms across your body. So when you're coming across, you're using the anterior portion of your deltoids, and then you're going to pull your chest into it. And again, what would be creating the resistance would be the posterior delt and the muscles of the upper back, like your rhomboids. So the rhomboids are going to resist this curl. See, I'm going to curl my body a little bit forward, and the rhomboids are going to resist. And then if you're pulling back, the rhomboids are contracting, using the back of your deltoids to pull back, and you're resisting against the front of your shoulder and the chest. What you want to understand is that muscles always have a primary mover, the one that's contracting in the direction you want to go. And then to balance it off, all the muscles always have an antagonist, so that you don't hyperextend in movements. So by awakening the antagonist resistance, you get to create resistance without having to use any weights or bands or anything, by just awakening the muscles inside. Biceps and triceps, the bicep flexes the arm. It also pulls it up a little bit. So this is a full contraction, a very, very full contraction for a bicep. And then a full extension of the tricep would be kicking it back like that. So you'll see that the arm, the elbow joint, and then also pulling it up is more bicep. As you pull it down and extend, you're gonna have more tricep. And so anytime we're moving through a range of movement, when you're contracting in, the primary mover is the bicep. And as you're extending out, the primary mover is the tricep. And then, of course, the opposite is true, right? When you're coming in the antagonist resistance, the thing that's making it difficult for you to bend your arm is going to be your tricep. And then as you're extending, it's going to be the bicep that makes it difficult to extend the arm. Then you get into your forearms. The forearms flex the hands, really, and they rotate the hands. So anytime you're reaching out, if we want to work on the forearms, you may concentrate on creating a fist or opening your hand very big. Those are things that are going to be great for working the digitals here, right? These movements are also forearm, right? So if you flex your hand down or lift up, that's all forearm. Now we'll get into the core, right? So let's just keep it real simple. This group of muscles is, we'll just call these your abs, these are your obliques, and then low back, right? Your erector spinae. And so remember, muscles always pull. So if you're curling forward, you're contracting your abdominal muscles, then the movement is really pretty simple. It's not so much a hip flexor right here where people often do sit-ups, it's a curling of the trunk. So you're gonna try to bring your sternum and your navel together, but back out this middle part. That's kind of what your abdominals do, pull it through. And then you're thinking about, this is stretching the low back. So when you're curling through here, if you wanna create additional resistance, you just activate the lower back and resist that movement a little bit. And then the opposite is true when you're coming through this range of movement. So the movement really for the abdominal muscles is not very large. And same is true for the low back. You want to flex through here. Now you may contract upper back that would take you further back, but the low back itself does not have that much range of movement. You're going to come from here to about there. That's going to be your core. Side to side, we'll also try to keep our hips level to just see what that looks like. So this muscle would be pulling down, the obliques here are pulling down, and these are going to resist if you're doing antagonist resistance. And the obliques also rotate your torso. And so again, just like we were talking about, the neck has all three planes, the core has all three planes. All the torso works on all ranges of movement. When we're going through different planes of movement, you'll be flexing, you'll be rotating, you'll be bending front and back. So now we're going to get into the hip area. This part of the hip, when you're pulling up, is the hip flexors, right? And so the hip flexors connect kind of the abdominal region with the quad, and it pulls the leg up in front. And then the antithesis of that is the glutes, which take the hip and move it back. So if you think about kind of like a running movement with your leg, the hip flexor is going to pull that leg up. The glute is going to push your leg back. And again, so in an antagonist resistance, as you're pulling up, if you want to make it harder, you're contracting the glutes. And as you're pressing through here, you're keeping the hip flexor right in that area. And again, the hip also moves in a bunch of different areas. So you have on the outside, so we were talking about kind of the gluteus maximus, right? The big round muscle, boom, here. So you also have the gluteus medius, which kind of moves it out, and then you have your adductor group that moves it in. So if you're thinking about the hip and moving it out, you're using your gluteus medius. And then anytime you're pulling down, you're using the adductor group, which runs through your leg and attaches back up into that pelvic region. And essentially the hip has a pretty good range of movement also, right? And so we're trying to think about how do we make it work sagittally, frontally, and transverse. Now we're getting into the thigh. And the thigh is really made up of the quadricep, which are 4 big muscles in the front, and the hamstrings, which are 3 big muscles in the back, primarily. And the quadricep muscle is the muscle that contracts and straightens your leg out. So if you see someone doing a leg extension or a leg press or squats, a lot of that is the quad. The back side of that is your hamstring. And the hamstring contracts to pull your heel up towards your butt. And again, so if we were thinking about running, right, the quadricep's going to be the one that like stretches forward, the hamstring's going to pull along the ground and flex. And so when we're doing work, if we're trying to create antagonist resistance, often we're using gravity, which adds to the resistance of the quads, but we may also want to use hamstrings. And so if you're coming through and you're pulling and contracting with your hamstrings, that would increase the amount of resistance in the quadriceps. Moving on down, we got our calf muscles. And the calf muscles play some role in bending the leg also, right? You have your big gastroc in the back, right? And so anytime you're getting up onto your toes, you're using calves. Your ankle moves in several different ways also. So you'll also include the muscles in the front. Anterior tibialis is what it's called. And so the ankle joint moves this way. The knees really are primarily a linear movement. They have a little bit of side rotation, but not as much. Mostly they're on that range of movement. So I know it's very simple, but you don't have to know it that well. What you want to do is think about what we're trying to do in all our movements is make the natural movements of the body, the ones that we're going to do all the time anyway, a little more difficult by incorporating gravity or isokinetics, right? And we're going to challenge ourselves by pressing limb against limb, or we're going to awaken the body and use antagonist resistance and make it work through there. So that's a very simple biomechanics. We'll go deeper throughout the program, talking about what the muscles are doing as they're fighting one another. But I just wanted to give you a real basic biomechanic lesson to get started.